wrote on fiction press. I always thought about the fan fiction community and how, you would post a chapter and people would comment and there was this camaraderie. And I went, that sounds like fun. I'll do that. And I started off going, I'm just going to post a chapter a day. And every second I had, I was writing. Over the span of about a year, I wrote all 5 books in what would become the Heir Awakened series.
Oh my gosh.
At that point, I had readers online going, okay, what's next? Is this going to be published? The backlist as an author is one of the most stabilizing forces that we have to draw from. When I first started with Heir Awakens, I prioritized reaching out to people who already had platforms because I knew that I didn't have a platform yet. At the time of launch, I really viewed it as I needed to work with people who already had platforms where readers were, where my potential readers were.
I love to hear other authors' stories. It is so inspiring and encouraging, especially when we hear their full story, not just the highlight reel. Because despite what it feels like sometimes, no one is an overnight success. So let's chat about different aspects of author life and dive behind the scenes of publishing. Hi everyone! Today's video is super exciting because I'm here with the talented Elise Kova, and I'm so excited. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Yay, me too. I can't wait to chat. I have so many good questions. I actually got them from Instagram, so I'm super excited about them. But first, I should really quick introduce you to everybody who might not have met you yet, and also introduce our topic really quick. So in case you guys haven't already read the title below the video, this is Elise Kova. She's the author of, if I counted right, 29 books. Does that sound right?
Is that where I'm up to? I just blanket say more than 25 at this point.
I love that.
I know it's more than that and less than 30. And until I hit 30, I'm just like, it's more than 25.
Well, I did put in the notes. I was like, you could say 30 if you count the box sets, which I would, because they're like an additional launch and you have to format and all these steps. So I don't know. I feel like you've crossed 30 almost. And then on top of that, you also have your coaching online, like one-on-one coaching on your website. I saw you have a Patreon page, which is so cool. And then of course your fantasy novels, which are amazing, but also a really exciting nonfiction project, which we're going to talk about today, that I think is going to be extremely helpful to other indie authors. And so I definitely have some questions about that. And then our topic today, I kind of mentioned this before we started going, but because I got some really good questions on Instagram and they were all around marketing. It seemed like there were so many about marketing. And I think that's because a lot of indie authors, we feel so confused. It's like this big mysterious thing that we're like, what is this? And I really admire how well you do it. You market so well. And even like you have this massive community, and they shout out your book on like Book Talk and Bookstagram and so many other places. So I thought it'd be really cool to chat about marketing and get some insight from you.
I get really jazzed about marketing. It's one of my favorites. So
me too.
Like writing and marketing, it's heaven for me to talk about both.
Okay, perfect. I love it. So let's start with like a rapid fire kind of get to know you for anybody who hasn't met you before. And this first one is kind of a softball. It's, are you a plotter or a pantser or somewhere in between?
I am somewhere in between, mostly pantser. That being said, I do have to have the key ideas and elements of the story. So like the opening image, inciting incident, climax. Maybe I have a few scenes planned out where I'm just like, oh, this is a really cool scene that I can't wait to write. And I think it'll go kind of somewhere in here. And I do build some of the world before I start, but I don't build out everything and I don't strictly plot, because the times that I've tried to do that, my characters will just go off the rails and I'm like, great, that was a lot of time that I wasted because I can't use the rest of this outline now. So exceptional.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So that's what works for me.
You sound like a discovery writer is a term I heard recently, where you kind of discover it as you go, but you kind of know where you're going.
I definitely am in many ways. And there are things that I intentionally don't build out about the world before going into it, because I kind of want to have those moments where I get to feel it. Yeah. And I think once you've really been writing up for a long time, and I don't really know where in the process it happened for me, but you start to get a feeling of like, oh, this part of the story is boring. How do I fix this? How do I make this not boring? And so you kind of have those moments when you're writing where you just sort of feel what needs to happen. And I like to leave myself room for that.
I love that. That's so cool. And this next question, I feel like I know the answer because you write the coolest mix of these two, but would you prefer to read/write series or standalones?
Both. It's both. I mean, I really can't have a preference because it depends on my mood. And in the case of writing, the story that I'm looking to tell, sometimes I have an idea that I'm like, oh, this has to be a series. There's no way I could condense this in a satisfactory manner into a standalone. And other things I'm like, nope, this is it, one and done.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And I love how your series, your Married to Magic series, is like both at the same time. So I'm curious, was that a marketing decision? I'm kind of jumping ahead into my thoughts.
It was a little bit marketing strategic and also just what I wanted to write at the time. And again, you'll find a lot of my stuff has roots in both. For me, I was so burnt out by this really big epic series that was super complex. And I said, I just want to write a standalone. I don't want to have to jump into planning another super big, complex plot, story, world. And so I went, okay, I'm going to write a standalone. I've never written a standalone and I don't know how it's going to sell. And that's the nice thing about a standalone is that you go, if it does well, you could theoretically write more. And that's why I sort of had ideas for more in the world. And I'm like, all right, if it does well, there's more here that I can play with. If it doesn't do well and it's not really worth my time to write another one, I'll be glad that I wrote the first and got the story out and had the palate cleanser, but I can leave it at that. So it kind of was a bit of column A, column B.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Kind of seeing where it goes. I love that.
Again, have an idea, but pants along the way.
Yep. And now you're on, is it book 4 in that series?
Yes, book 4 comes out. A Duet with the Siren Duke is in August. And,
oh my gosh.
I know I at least have a 5th book in me, but as I've told my readers, I have ideas for more. And as long as I'm having fun writing them and I feel like the books are good, and as long as my readers are having fun reading them and they think the books are good, I don't really see a reason why I would stop at
That's
that
true.
point.
That's a really good point. I was just about to say, do you have like a cutoff number in your head where you're like, okay, 10 books and that's it, or something like that?
No, I really don't. And there's something that as someone who is kind of business oriented and likes to strategize and plan, it is a little bit stressful, but it's also kind of fun to be like, if I want to write another standalone, I can just write another standalone.
Yes, that's the genius thing about standalones in a series is there's no limit. There's
exactly.
I love that. So I'm super curious what your typical like writing schedule is like, especially because you have so many projects going on at once. Do you feel like you have a schedule or does it change?
My schedule definitely has to adapt, as I think most authors do, because sometimes, our editors get behind or you get behind or just life gets in the way, as it is known to do. I generally try and work on some manuscript every day. Sometimes that's writing, sometimes that's editing. And I even have found that I work on the weekends. And for a while there, I was trying to say, I'm not going to do any work on the weekends because as many people discovered through the pandemic, when you work from home, it's really hard to find separations between work and personal life if you don't impose them. And so for a while, I was really trying for my mental health to be like, okay, I'm not going to work on the weekends. And I think that previously I was taking it too far and I basically worked 7 days a week, at least 5 to 10 hours a day, depending on what day and what else I had going on.
It's easy to do.
And it is. And then I stopped working 2 days a week. But what I was finding was that when I went back to work, especially with something like writing or editing, on Monday, my brain just wasn't in it. And my Mondays were so sluggish. So what I found is my writing days, my real writing days are Monday through Friday as part of my work day. And again, writing, editing, something to do with the manuscript, whatever I need to do. Yeah. But on the weekends too, I find that I work better and I stay with my momentum if I, maybe just edit half a chapter or write 100 or 200 words. It's not enough that it's going to burn me out. Yeah. But it's enough that my brain stays in the world. So that way come Monday, I'm not going, oh, well, what was happening again?
I love that. That's the coolest thing. I might have to take that up because that's genius. And what do you feel like is the most important element of good writing? Like, is there something as you're coming to write that you're like, I have to make sure I do this?
My biggest thing is writing with a focus on the characters. And I think that sometimes when I say that, people will kind of go, huh? Because I'm an epic fantasy writer. And so I build these big worlds and I love building big worlds and, could talk for hours on that alone.
Yes.
But what I also always point out to, especially epic fantasy writers or sci-fi people who write these big worlds, is that you can have the most interesting worlds. You could have the most intriguing plots. But if people can't connect with and care about the character that they're going to see that world through and experience the plot through, then they're never going to see the world because they're not going to want to read the book. Yeah. So I really think that really strong stories, and where I always start is, who is my character? What is their motivation? And why does the reader want to root for them? Because if I don't have a clear image of those three things, then I don't want to start writing yet.
I love that. That's why your characters are so awesome. I was wondering, they're so amazing. I love reading them. I don't know if you can even see them. I have them on the shelf. I was like, they're so good. And so do you feel like that's something, this is a tangent for my regular questions, but I'm super curious if you feel like that's something you picked up along the way, or do you feel like that was your focus when you first started out? Like from the get-go?
I think that I started out instinctively there when I wrote my Air Awakened series, because I really wasn't writing for publication. So I wasn't, for better or worse, like totally worrying about craft and marketing and sales and all of that. And so, and because I was a hardcore pantser at that point, I planned nothing going into that first book.
I love it.
I think that all I had to focus on was the character. The only thing that I knew for sure about the world was the character. And then I think in some subsequent series, I ended up shifting a little bit and focusing a little too much on the plot and almost taking for granted that what worked so well, I think, in the Air Awakens world was the character work that happened in that story. And I've since tried to really focus on studying that and making it a more conscious choice and understanding why certain things work when it comes to characters and why other things don't work when it comes to characters, and really making that an active decision-making process in my writing.
That's so cool. I love that. That's genius. And I feel like you have so many books going on right now. Like, how do you balance that with all the different books you have going on? Do you feel like you have to sit in one character one day and a different the next, or do you do like week by week or month by month?
So I really try as much as possible, especially when I'm in like the more intense stages of writing and editing. I really try and focus on one book at a time. Now that might mean that I put in a couple long days for a couple of weeks to get it done by a deadline so I can go focus on the next one to get that done by that deadline. But when it comes to drafting and developmental edits, I really want to stay in one character's head, in one story, in one moment in time in the world, and not jump around. Now, the exception is if I have a book that's in the later stages of line editing and proofreading, something like that, where it's less about, am I focused on every last detail and trying to encompass this whole plot in my head all at once, and the whole story of the character all at once, and just more about, does this line make sense? Is that comma in the right place? That's something that I can do in tandem with those earlier stages that do require more of that mental effort.
That's really cool. Well, that's kind of encouraging to me because I know so many people who can do multiple and I can't. So that I'm with you. Like, it's one project at a time for the most part, especially when you have to be kind of intensely in their head, like you said.
Yeah. And I've definitely done it in the past. I've had to do it before. I'll probably have to do it again. So I know it's something that I can do, but I think for me, I always think of it as everyone's brain is wired in a particular way. And you have things that work best for you. They might look like what works best for me, or they might look totally different. And it's not that we can't do, in oftentimes, other things that run counter to the way our brain is wired. But I always think that the more we can play in the structure that our brain is naturally in tune to, and the more that we can focus on optimizing that rather than trying to learn a system that runs counter to that, the more productive we're going to be.
I never thought about it that way. That's genius. Oh my gosh. And you have so many projects going on right now that I feel like you are operating in your genius zone for sure, the way that you are balancing things. So speaking of all the cool things you got going on, including that nonfiction project, what's something you're especially excited about, like that you're working on at the moment?
Well,
or
I
multiple things.
Definitely excited for the nonfiction project. As you mentioned, I started coaching on my website. And even before that, I have a writing and publishing tips newsletter where I talk about everything from how I approach planning stories and world building and writing advice to publishing advice, and how I approach making covers and different types of paid advertising. And from that came the coaching, where I realized a lot of people wanted one-on-one time. And I kind of went, okay, I don't know if I really want to make a whole course, but I liked the idea of someone could just, if they had a couple quick questions, they could get 15 minutes with me and I could answer them to the best of my abilities.
Yeah.
And then through coaching, one thing evolving into the next, I really discovered that a lot of people were coming to me with the same questions over and over and over again, which I'm happy to answer. But I kept having that feeling where I went, I wish that there was some way that I could just distill sort of all of these basic questions that people ask me into one format that then people could have and have access to if they want to get my insight on something. And then they could still have the coaching if they wanted to ask a more nuanced or follow-up question or something like that. But I remember being an author, and I remember counting being an author, being a starting author, and counting every single penny and really having to make those really hard decisions. And that stays with you for your whole career. But especially at the start. And I'm like, I feel terrible, or I started to feel terrible when I'm like, all right, I have these people who keep coming to me asking the same thing as the last person. Can I put something together that maybe is cheaper than them booking time with me, is more accessible on their own time? They don't have to worry about my schedule. And so I'm trying to put together a little nonfiction project. I don't really know 100% of the formats. I think it's going to be a book, but maybe it's a book with a workbook, or maybe there's live videos. I'm still working it out, but it's definitely something that I'm excited for. And then of course, my next big fiction release, as we mentioned, is a duet with the Siren Duke, and that's out in August.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait for the sirens. Oh, I'm so excited about anything like underwater.
I'm excited too. But I'm also really nervous because there was a lot of logistics I had to work through of like, how do you write a book underwater where the main character is human, and humans living underwater usually is not
doesn't usually work.
It doesn't usually work. Or, it is a fantasy romance. So there were certain logistics that I had to figure out.
I can see what you're saying.
So I'm excited and nervous to see how it's received.
What stage is it in? Can I ask? I'm super curious.
Yeah. So this book has fought with me. It's been a labor of love. It's a story that is near and dear to my heart. But unfortunately, as most stories that we love so dearly, it's fought with me.
Oh yeah.
And so I just finished the second, third, last round of developmental edits, and now it's deep in line edits.
Okay.
And it should be done in time.
Okay, awesome. This is such a tangent, but do you change things last minute? Like, do you change anything big? Okay, so do I.
So, well, as far as like, the biggest thing that'll change last minute is I've changed character names last minute, because I'm one of those people that I'll put placeholder names in.
Me too.
So I don't have to worry about thinking about all the names.
Yeah.
But as far as like plot, I really try not to change anything major on the plot outside of developmental edits, which is why I spend so much time in that stage of editing.
Oh, that makes total sense. That's really smart. I feel like, there could be a lot in the siren world, in the underwater world. It's almost like it's own character, so to speak.
Yeah.
You have to really develop that. But I think when you said books fight with you, I just have to say, I feel like those are the best books though. They always end up being the ones that are the favorites. So
well, and here's to hoping that's the case. A Duel with the Vampire Lord was the last book that really fought with me, and I think that one turned out okay. So
that was my favorite. So there you go.
Here's to hoping that it happens again.
It's just gonna keep getting better and better.
Fingers crossed.
So, yes. And so speaking of like going all the way back to the beginning, and you're like backstory of how you started, this is kind of my favorite part, and my favorite questions to ask is like, the very, very beginning, where you got your start in everything. So I guess I'll just like start with when you did start writing. What was that like, and what was publishing like, and your very, very first book like?
So writing, as I think is the case for many authors, writing has always been a part of my life. That being said, I never really considered it as something to pursue.
Right.
My parents,
Most people don't.
I've been so lucky that my parents are so supportive, but my parents are also very realistic, very pragmatic. And they're like, if you want to go into a creative career, we will support you and we will encourage you. But we will also tell you, there is the term starving artist for a reason. For every success that you hear, there's a lot of failures that you don't hear.
Yeah.
And so, that was always something where I'm like, okay, I like food. I like financial stability.
Yeah.
So I got a business degree. I did all the things. And it really wasn't until I was living abroad, and it was 2012. 2012.
Okay.
And I was living abroad, and I made friends with a lovely woman who had always wanted to be an author. And we had an hour-long commute, and we worked at the same place, so we carpooled together. Oh, cool. And so we had 2 hours every day where we just talked for 2 hours. And it really reignited my passion for writing throughout spending the next year and a half, 2 years, doing that with her. And I went, okay, I think I want to write, but I didn't it wasn't an idea to be published. I just wanted to do it for funsies because she was talking about her book and I wanted to talk about a book too. And we were like, all right. And so I wrote on Fiction Press, which, for the young ones listening, that's like an older Wattpad.
Really? Okay. I've never heard of that.
I'm ancient. But so I wrote on Fiction Press, and the reason being is because it was a sister site to fanfiction.net, which for the younger ones listening, that's like an early AO3, which is what I grew up reading fan fiction on. Wow. So I wanted that, I always thought about the fan fiction community and how, you would post a chapter and people would comment and there was this camaraderie. And I went, that sounds like fun. I'll do that. So I posted a chapter a day, and I started off going, I'm just going to post a chapter a day. And every second I had, I was writing. And 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there, I would just throw a few words down however I could. And over the span of about a year, I wrote all 5 books in what would become the Air Awakened series.
Oh my gosh.
Then at that point, I had readers online going, okay, what's next? Is this going to be published? And so by that point, I was coming back. I was in the US, and I reached out to a friend from college who is also an author. And I reached out to her because I knew that she had a book deal. And I was like, all right, I have books. What do I do? No idea how publishing works. And so she explained the querying process to me. I went down that route. It didn't pan out. I ended up independently publishing the series. And I mean, as they say, the rest is history.
Yes. So when you did decide to independently publish, what was that like? Did you just know, you know what, this is awesome, I'm going to do it? Or did you have some struggle with that?
Well, so I never really had any hangups with independent publishing, but what I did find through my friend and my research was basically that, traditional publishers really aren't interested in books that have been previously published. Even the fact that it had been on Fiction Press was almost a little bit of a strike against me, but luckily the books changed so much in editing that they weren't fundamentally, they were at the core the same, but they really weren't the same story.
Okay.
And so I sort of thought about it from the perspective of, okay, I don't have an issue with independent publishing or self-publishing. I use the two interchangeably.
Yeah, me too.
I don't have a problem with independent publishing, but I might as well see what traditional could offer me. I don't know if I'll accept it or not, but if I go the independent route, I am foregoing this route completely. And I'm very much a person who's like, I want to see what options are there.
Options, yeah.
Yeah. So when one didn't pan out, the choice was made and I pivoted to independent publishing. And as I mentioned, I have a background in business. I loved the idea of entrepreneurship, as stressful as it also is to be an entrepreneur. Right? But I loved that. And it wasn't something that I went, oh gosh, now I have to self-publish. It was kind of like, all right, I'm doing this. This is happening.
Exciting. Yeah. Do you feel like you enjoy all the entrepreneurial side things then of it? Like, do you like to be in control of the covers and the hiring people, and or are there some things you're like, yeah, I could prefer to have a publisher take that?
I mean, I think it depends on the day. There are absolutely, and I do want to add to, as early as I can, I think it's important to stress that I don't see independent publishing as better than traditional publishing.
Right.
I don't see authors as feeling like they have to be one or the other. I think there is a hybrid path. I also think if you are someone who is inclined more toward one than the other, that's okay. They both have their unique pros and cons. So I do just want to take a second because I think sometimes there can be rhetoric out there that's like one is better than the other. And it's
like we're in some fight or something.
Yeah, like they both are offer something and they both have problems. So I mean, as far as the business stuff, it was daunting. And there are days that I think, it'd be nice to just kind of throw up my hands and let go. But I think one of the things that is so strong about independent publishing that I love is that because you have that control, you really are able to babysit your backlist. And, a traditional publisher, they're a business too, and they have to focus on what's coming next. And at a certain point, some books might not be selling enough to merit the publisher's focus anymore. And so they're just kind of maybe not given the care and attention that you would otherwise want. And as the author, and in independent publishing, you get to give it that life, although you don't have the same reach that a traditional publisher would. Again, pros and cons.
Right. Yes. That balance effect. Oh my gosh. So do you feel like that's part of your marketing strategy? I'm now kind of jumping into the marketing a little early because I'm curious. Is backlist kind of a big factor for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you feel like
I think that the backlist as an author is one of the most stabilizing forces that we have to draw from. Because I think that, you as an author are going to always be limited by your ability to release books, whatever pace you can sustain, whether that's 1 book a year, 2 books a year, 5 books a year, I don't care. That's your gate. That's how many new releases you can have. And so if you are sustaining only on your new releases, then your income threshold and your ability to find a comfortable plateau where you could do this job sustainably is limited by that number, limited by the success of your new releases. Whereas I view it as both in the sense of, my new releases are going to lift up my backlist. And I really try and think of how many ways can I get readers who would be interested, hopefully, obviously, go back and read through my backlist, because that's already there. The work is already done. And that's kind of the glorious thing as an author of you've created intellectual property that can work on its own effectively if, with a little bit of help.
Right. So how far back do you go? Do you feel like you do a little advertising for every single book? Or I suppose not everyone, because there's like first books in series, right?
Yeah.
So you probably don't do all of them, but
so I really look at, when it comes to my advertising, I look at what books are my strongest to be kind of my top of funnel, like what books have the best conversion, what books do I think are the easiest to market, and I've had the best success marketing. And that's sort of my top of funnel. And sometimes maybe that's a loss leader where, and that's something that I can do, having a backlist of, what did we decide? Almost 30 books, where I can say, maybe I don't make money advertising this book one. But I know
you have
that
all the others.
Exactly. I know that if they read this book one, a certain percentage of readers are going to go to book 5, and a certain percentage of those readers will go on to this series, and so on.
I love that.
And so it's definitely a huge factor.
Oh my gosh, I just want to keep talking marketing because I'm like in it, but I should jump back really quick because I'm still very curious about like your very first book. What year did that come out, by the way? I should
Air
ask that
Awakens
first.
was August of 2015 when it was released.
Okay, very cool. And do you feel like you said it changed quite a bit? Do you feel like it was the same readers then followed you over and reread it and supported it?
I don't think so, just because I took it down off of Fiction Press when I was querying, and querying, that process was about 18 months for me. And then I took about 6 months to prepare myself for publication.
Gotcha. So it's kind of a gap there of time.
Yeah, there was definitely a gap. No, I do know that there were some readers who found it. It would also have a different title too. But I do know that there were some readers who found it because they subsequently were like, I read this on Fiction Press. I remember this story.
That's so cool.
Definitely some that found it, but I don't think, at least, that I can attribute too much to the Fiction Press readers. Now, if I had moved faster, if I had gone directly into independent publishing and got it out and kept the books on Fiction Press right up until, the last second or something like that, maybe it would have been a different story. But for me, in the path that I took, I don't think too many readers followed.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always those what ifs. I wonder what would happen.
Yeah, right.
So this is like perfect transition into the marketing because you're talking about like how you introduce your book to strangers and how you like built a fan base. So I should back up really quick and just say, like, when I was trying to choose this topic, I did ask on Instagram for a ton of questions, and they were so marketing focused because I feel like I kind of said this already, but indie authors just find it very woo-woo, and we're not sure sometimes like what's working and what's not working. So like I said to you, I think you're amazing at it. I think your community that you built is marketing in its own way as well, very organic. So I'd love to pick your brain about that and just chat about, I guess the very first question would be, what was a way that you introduced your book to strangers and got them excited about it and like initially built that up? Yeah. And you kind of hinted at this already.
I do want to say a quick tangent. I will return to that, but I do want to say a quick tangent of, well, most of my perspective on this comes from being an indie author, because that's what I am right now in the US. I do want to say that I know a lot of trad authors who do and or have to absolutely bust their ass, if you'll excuse the bit of crassness, when it comes to marketing. And while what traditional authors can do versus what indie authors can do can look very different, I do think that there are some principles that can apply to both. So I don't want to be exclusionary. And I also just want to acknowledge that, this wild west of the marketing game, indies are not the only one who are venturing into it. There are a lot of trad authors in the trenches with us, as I mix metaphors.
Has to now, right?
And it's just the fact of it. So as far as going back to your question, what were some ways that I introduced my books to strangers and how I got them excited about it or built a fan base? When I first started with Air Awakens, I prioritized reaching out to people who already had platforms, because I knew that I didn't have a platform yet. I didn't have any kind of social media presence, really. I had a newsletter that was maybe 50 people big, and probably half of them were my closest family and friends. And so I knew that I couldn't spread the word about my book. That isn't to say that I didn't invest in those things, because I saw it as part of my long-term strategy, and we can transition to that or talk about that more in the future. But at the time of launch, I really viewed it as I needed to work with people who already had platforms where readers were my potential readers were. And so a lot of my initial marketing investment into my books was not in ads, was not in really ads are the big one that authors do, but other promotions. I really focused on
like influencers, kind of
in influencer marketing, but getting arcs, physical arcs into their hands and sending as many copies as I could, which at the time was only like, admittedly, somewhere between 30 and 50, if memory serves. Like, I'm not talking hundreds here. But it was between the shipping and the cost of the arcs, it was my marketing budget. And I think that one thing we as authors have to remember is that we are always going to recommend our book. Of course we are. We're always going to go out in the world and say, buy this book because we wrote it and we think it's probably good because we wrote it and have an invested interest in it selling. And readers know that too. And I think that there's nothing wrong with going out and promoting yourself. But at the same time, it's always going to be stronger to have someone else promote your work. Makes sense. So I think it has to come from a place of being authentic. And that's one thing that I've always tried to communicate with influencers that I've worked with, or bloggers as it was way back in the day, where I've always tried to say, look, if it doesn't sound like a book you would be interested or your, subscribers, followers, whatever would be interested in, then that's okay. We can respectfully part ways and not work together. And I wish you all the best, because I think that even though it is a promotional thing, there still has to be a bit of that authenticity for it to mean something when someone sees that recommendation. And then the other thing that I think, as far as like getting people excited and building my fan base, I really think about something that I call the author promise. I don't know if I invented that in my head or heard it somewhere. It could be either. But I think about the author promise, which is this unspoken promise that we have with our readers. And it is basically like, if you see an Elise Kova book, you should have some idea of what you're going to get. I think that we as authors have to honor that promise that we make with our readers as a brand within a series. And I think being consistent and honoring that, being transparent about it, really kind of help build that community, because it becomes very clear of, if you like epic fantasy with some amount of romance, you're probably going to like my books. Yes. And you belong in my community if you go, that's me. And if that's not you, then that's okay. There's a community out there for you. I promise. Go find it. I think that really helps.
That's so cool. Did you feel like you found comp authors then who had similar stories to yours early on, where you could be like, to those influencers, I'm like this author, and you like them because you like, I don't know, a good comparison author? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, back then, Throne of Glass was the big one with YA. And so Air Awakens was, one of the pitches was, it's Avatar The Last Airbender meets Throne of Glass. Except Aang is a girl and falls in love with Zuko. So
I love that.
But so, I think that really helps too with anything that can make it clear what someone is getting into.
Yes, I love that. And it's so good that you included the part about being very kind and not being pushy, because I feel like some people do go too far and they'll reach out to influencers and like kind of demand it. So it's like, you don't want to go too far, right? And press for it. But it sounds like you did a really great job of just developing those relationships. And I'm super curious, do you feel like some of them are still around now? Like that fan base continued to grow and those people stayed with you? Or is it expanding?
Absolutely. I mean, there is expected attrition that's going to happen with any group. But I think I still have at least one or two readers who were among those readers that went, I read you on Fiction Press and I found this story and have been with me from the very beginning. And I know their names. I've seen pictures of their kids when their kids were born. Like it's one of those things where like, I feel like I'm part of that, we're all part of that community together.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That's so cool. And those people are like the dedicated, or like the super fans, as they call them, the dedicated readers. And I feel like you do a really great job of getting people to that level. Like you introduce them to your books and then you get them to the next level of being super fans. Do you have a strategy for that? Like, how did that come about? I don't really, that's one of the few things that I don't really have a strategy for, because it really is genuinely, if someone's going to get to that point, it's real.
I want it to be real. I don't want it to be like I bought it or forced it or bribed it or anything like that. That being said, I do think that one of the things that you can do as an author to help that process is be accessible, be honest, be transparent. If you say you're going to do something for your readers, do it. If there is something you can do for your readers to give them kind of like bonus content or material or something special to the people who are doing so much for you, who are literally helping put food on your table,
Mm-hmm.
do the thing that can, you know, maybe it's an extra hour or two of your time, and maybe it doesn't give you any more money,
Right.
but it's going to, I firmly believe, at least, it's going to help build those connections long term. Because if someone sees that you are investing in them, it is so much easier for them to want to invest back in you. And I think it has to be that two-way street.
I love that. That makes so much sense, because it's developing a real relationship. It's genuine and authentic. That's so cool. I feel like that's what we need to focus on more, almost, is that relationship side of things as an author. I don't know. I'm curious if that, I don't want to say plays into your marketing, because then it would become more of a strategy again. But like, if you focus on that side of things just naturally on the relationship side when you come to marketing?
I think so. I mean, I think that there's different buckets of marketing, and obviously something like a paid ad that I'm running on Facebook or Amazon or something, like that's just me going, buy my book. Here's a cool book. Please buy it. But when it comes to like my social media or my reader groups, like what you see is what you get. Like, I mean, and I think that, you know, that authenticity, again, as much as you're comfortable giving, because I have my own barriers too. And I've told my readers that I have things that I will not share with you because they're for me. They're something that I want to keep for myself. And it might seem arbitrary, but those are the lines. But I mean, I think that even in my strategy on social media, I always think that you have to think of social media as a conversation and not a megaphone, because people are going to follow you because they want to have that interaction with you. They want to feel like you're speaking to them, and the things that make them laugh, and the struggles that they have, and the things that they want to hear about, and that you're open to hearing from them and are reading their comments. And, you know, it's a struggle to do it. I certainly struggle to keep up with comments and DMs and all of that. And I'm the worst at it, but you still make the effort.
Yes. It's almost, what's it called? Is it cold marketing versus warm marketing, I think?
Oh,
yes. The terms for it, where the cold marketing is the buy my book, and it's it's cold and it's not comfortable, versus warm marketing is almost the relationship side, it feels like.
Yeah.
As you're describing it.
I've definitely heard it definitely in those veins of where the cold marketing is like, you don't have a relationship with the person, and it's just we've never met, can you buy the thing? Whereas the warm marketing is you have the audience who's warmed up to you. They're familiar with you.
Yes. I like that. Do you feel like you focus on one more than the other, or is it 50-50, or maybe you don't really even have a strategy? It depends on the day.
I would say that I definitely have the cold marketing strategy. Again, that is my pretty much my paid ads. That's
it's kind of easier to lock down, maybe.
Well, it's easier to lock down, and it's easier that is the cold, I'm going to try and reach someone. And it's someone that maybe has never heard of me or my books, but I'm trying to get them into my world, and who maybe then they will, you know, subscribe to me and follow me on TikTok or something like that. So that's definitely a part of my strategy. But again, I try to invest as much time as I can in those relationship side of things, in my street team, in my Patreon, in my newsletter to, you know, the people who have come, my text line, you know, that sort of thing.
That's so good. That's so wise to, just kind of pour into the people who are supporting you. I think that's really smart. And not that many authors do that. We kind of typically, when we think marketing, we focus on the cold side almost, as we've been talking about it.
Well, I think one of the things to think about too, that I've always sort of had in my head is, you know, and this is an arbitrary number, like this is not a real number. But I always sort of had that thought of like, I don't have to have tens of thousands or millions of readers to sustain myself as an author. And my definition of success was I want to be able to support myself with this and do this long term. And anything else above that is exceptional. I am so honored, so excited, so flabbergasted half the time. But that's my baseline. That's my North Star of as long as I still get to do this as an author. And one of the things that I thought when I was starting out and taking the leap to become a full-time author and all of that was I don't have to have those tens of thousands of readers. If I do, great. But really what I need is 3, 4, 5,000 readers, whatever that number is, of people who are going to buy every book I release. And if I have that, then I know that I'm going to be able to sustain. So rather than thinking about it from the perspective of, oh, I need to reach 20 million people, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of, how do I get 5,000 people to buy my book when I release it year after year, time after time?
Yes, that almost takes the pressure off because you're not trying to reach everyone. And it's more like your people that you're trying to reach.
And you'll never, that's one thing that I think some authors struggle with and people in marketing struggle with, accepting the fact that you can't be everything to everyone. Yeah. And so many times I'll ask authors who are just starting out, I'll ask, who is your book for? They'll be like, well, I think anyone can enjoy it. And it's like, hopefully that's the case. Hopefully that's what, we all want as authors, is anyone to enjoy our work and pick it up.
Right.
But you have to know the person that you're speaking to. You have to really have that core person in mind where you're like, if you fit this model somewhat, you will probably like my book. I'm speaking to you. And if other people jump in on that, cool.
Then great. Yeah.
But this is my focus. This is my niche. This is my target.
That's so good. I love that. I'm so glad we went on this tangent. That wasn't like, I just went on a wild tangent and it was so awesome. But coming back to like the questions from Instagram, this one was really good. It's a little bit of a challenge, I know, because like picking one thing is always hard. But what would you say is most effective for marketing your books? And it could be like 1 year or like all throughout your career. Doesn't matter. It's a tough one, right?
So I'm going to give an answer that I think is a little bit of a cop-out, but I do mean it.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's flexibility.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I say that is because I've now, I started writing in 2012. I started querying and really studying the industry in 2013. And I've been published since 2015. And so I've been in the game for a minute. And the one consistent that I've seen is change, as cliche as that is to sound. And
I can see that.
And unsurprising. But when I started, blogs were the thing. Twitter was the thing.
And now they're not.
And now they're not. And then it was Bookstagram and, Facebook groups. And now I see, it's TikTok, and Bookstagram is still strong, but it's TikTok. And I see a trend toward Discord and more of those intimate one-on-one things rather than, Facebook and all that. And so it's a little bit of a cop out because I'm sure someone wants me to say like paid advertising is the thing, or, this is the thing. But I think you have to think about it from the perspective of you have to stay nimble. And even in ads, it's the same way where, when Apple made those changes and Facebook ads completely changed how they were run and people's strategies for them, the authors that I saw weathering stuff like that, weathering those changes, were the authors who were willing to either say, okay, this no longer works. What's the next big thing? How do I learn that? How do I do it? Or this has changed, but how do I make it work for me? I've invested too much time to abandon it, but how do I adjust it to really work for me? And so I think that having that quality where you're constantly looking to both to what is the next big thing and how do I double down and make more effective what I'm doing? That ability as an author and as a marketer is going to really serve you.
That makes so much sense. Oh my gosh. And now I feel bad because the next two questions are kind of pinholing again. When you make a really good point that we probably shouldn't like lock down. So these next ones will be kind of lighthearted, like everybody watching, do not take this as this is forever, right? Because of what you just said. But if money and time were no object whatsoever, what would be your like dream way to market your books in the moment, right? Because
Does producing my own TV show count? If money's no object.
Oh my gosh, how would that be marketing? I'm so curious now.
Well, I mean, if you have a TV show, that's a monumental marketing. I mean, at least from what I've heard, I've never had the luxury of having a film option or a film option be turned into a film. But from what I've heard from, authors who have or just industry knowledge is that, the author, of course, they make some money on the show or movie, but the real money comes in from the book sales, which
really
and that's where a huge portion of what the author profit from comes from.
Yes.
I could be totally wrong. Again, I'm speaking.
No, that
from
makes
my own
sense
research,
though.
So
you mean like Shadow and Bone, kind of, where like now those books are going to be selling like crazy?
Absolutely, stuff like that, or you know, even during the Twilight era, just anything like that. Where, and of course, there are other ways where if the author has a production credit or a writing credit or appears in an episode, is like there's all those other ways where you know money comes into play.
So cool.
But I mean, plus it's also just like.
That would be the coolest thing ever. If I had a bank account with unlimited zeros,
I would just go to Hollywood and be like, all right, what do I have to do to make this happen?
I love that.
I think like realistically, if bringing it to maybe I don't have an infinite bank account, but I also don't have to worry about, you know, the every penny and where it's going. I would love to do more that kind of gives to readers and makes things special for readers. I'd love to do like swag boxes for promotion for my books when those come out. I think those are so cool. And that would be amazing. I would love to do something like that more. And I've looked into it, but it's just, you know, it's all the logistics and the cost and it's expensive. I'd love to do my own limited editions or expand my merchandise store and have an actual permanent location with a staff. I'd love to offer more free books. If money was no issue to me, I would love to have a series that's just permanently free, and maybe it changes what series it is or something like that. So I think those are the things that I would do. Again, on that more realistic side, where like maybe money's no object, but I also still kind of have to work a little, but it's also not something I have to stress about.
Those are so many cool ideas. I love them. Okay, so now this is probably just as tricky, or maybe not, I don't know. But if you had almost no money and no time, then what would you do? This is like the whole reverse.
You know, this is hard because one of the things that I'll tell people when I'm in coaching is that you have to spend money or time.
Yeah, it's one or the other,
it's
right?
It's really hard to get out of not spending either. Not impossible. I don't want to discourage anyone, but it's challenging and you have to be creative. So I think that what I would do is I would focus on passive set it and forget it marketing. So where the time investment is maybe substantial, but you can do it up front and spread it out over a period of time as you're able. So what I'm thinking of are things like learning how to get some simple ads that run in the background on a low budget on AMS that you can kind of maybe check in once or twice a month. You know, they're not going to spend like crazy, but they're going to be like a nice steady clip that kind of gives your book some life. Newsletter automations, something like that, where you have a very, again, going to the funnel where you know how someone is going to join your newsletter. And then if they join it here, then they get sent over here and they have this automation and they get sent over here and have this automation and it pushes them through, again, that backlist brings them from one series to the other. Where is it a pain to set up? Absolutely. But once you do that, it just runs. You don't have to do it again. You know, building a promotional group. Again, going back to that relationship building where, yes, it is some time investment, maybe some money investment for giveaways, but you can try and do it within the limitations you have. And then you have those connections with readers where you can go, hey, I have a sale today. It's a surprise sale. Can anyone share it? And you have that there that then doesn't cost you anything and also doesn't cost you a whole lot of time to do. But I will say that, you know, if you are in a position where you're like, I have very little money and I have very little time, again, I don't want you to necessarily feel like, all right, well, Elise thinks that I'm screwed because I can't do either. That's not the case. But I do think that it's so important to be realistic about what you can achieve with the time you have in the time given. And I don't say realistic as in the sense of, oh, well, if you don't have a lot of money or time, you can never be a bestseller. But I mean that in the sense of if you want to build out a 30-day newsletter automation or a 3-month newsletter automation with 30 emails, that's probably going to take you 2 or 3 months to do. Now, when you have it, it will be amazing. But don't go into it thinking, oh, well, I'll get this done this month and then I'll edit my book next month and then I'll release that book in the 3rd month and everything will be ready and perfect. Set realistic expectations and goals for yourself. And I think that that will help actually get things done, because I don't know, maybe this is me imposing on things, but I'm definitely one of those people where if I look at my to-do list and go, there is no way in a snowball's chance in hell that I am finishing this to-do list today, suddenly my brain is like, well, let's not do any of it.
Not do any of it. Yes, yeah, I was just gonna say same.
Yeah, let's not. If you can't do all of it, then we're doing none of it.
Yeah, that's so funny. Very, very much the same. I love how you said that. When you going back to what you said about time, though, where you're like, if you're getting those relationships developed, you're almost gaining time through other people because they're willing to put in time, and they're like the way that you described it kind of made a light bulb go on, where you're like, you're investing time in them, but you're growing your time still because they're gonna market for you almost.
Absolutely. And I mean,
really
again,
cool.
You get a group to a point, going back to that thought of, rather than getting thousands and thousands of people, having a couple hundred that are your intense loyal ones.
Yes.
I would rather have a fan group that's 300 people large, but when I make a post, 50% of those people or more are going to share whatever it is that I'm going, hey, can you please share this today? Rather
That's
than
huge.
a group that has 5,000 people, but maybe 10 of them or 3 of them will even acknowledge the post.
Yeah, that's wild. That's such a good point to, just see people as like such valuable relationships, and it's worth it.
Yeah, it really is. Investing in relationships, I think, is always something that will pay off. That's a personal belief of mine. Invest in people, be good to people. And whether it's just, a simple exchange or a karmatic balance of the universe, however you want to look at it, I think it always comes back to work out well.
It made sense because, like you said earlier, if you're investing in them, they naturally want to invest in you. I love that. So that almost makes me want to. I wasn't going to ask this question because I feel like it's different for every author, but now I'm curious what you're going to say, because somebody was like, how important is social media for authors? And I feel like, again, it's every author's different, but now that you've been mentioning relationships, I'm curious how important you would rate it.
I do think social media is important. I think that there are some people who understandably cringe when I say that. I understand it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
And what I always say is I'm a big fan of parking. Regardless of if you think that you're going to use a social media or not, park your account, get the account name that you want. And you're going to have some natural people who find you and just follow you because they see your name. Even if you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to use this. It's there if you ever decide to. Again, you never know where you're going to have to pivot, going back to that. Yeah. But I also think that, at least the way that I've always viewed social media, is that you are going to get so much more return going deep on one platform than wide and shallow on many.
True.
And so find the platform that resonates the most with you, that you get, that you want to be on. Because if you're dragging your feet and hating every last second of being on a social platform, it's going to show in the content you make, and it's not going to be fun for anyone. So find that platform and invest in that platform. And I don't think it's the end all be all, especially since I'm a big proponent of owning your relationships, in the sense of, you've seen authors who've just been kicked off of Facebook through no fault of their own. It's just a rogue, something triggered in the system. And suddenly all of their followers are gone. They couldn't get them restored. It is a nuclear situation, but then you lose all that. So I'm always about, have your newsletter, have ways that you try and get people into that more owned relationship where you have that one-on-one contact. But I think that social media can really help with discovery, not just for readers, but for publishers, for audio publishers, for foreign rights publishers, all of that side of the industry. If that's something that you're interested in, whether you want to be hybrid or you just want the partner of a publisher in a foreign market, which is immensely helpful, it can help with that. Yeah. So I really think that social media is important for an author to do, but I don't think that it should be seen as, if you can be on TikTok and master TikTok, then that is the only thing that you have to do as an author. Because kind of like the element of being nimble being important, one of the other things that I've sort of seen, just having the benefit of years in this industry now, is it's never one thing. it's, or very rarely. I mean, there's exceptions to every
No, it makes
rule,
sense though.
but it's never one thing. It's not like I can look back and I can say, oh, this was the thing that I did that got me here. It's all of it.
Right.
It's investing in my street team. It's running paid ads to find new readers. It's learning newsletter strategies to funnel readers through my backlist. It's being on social media and having that organic discovery by readers and publishers that I now work with in foreign markets. And it's all of those things put together. It's not just one.
Yes. This makes me ask a question in my head. I'm like kind of curious how you decide if it's working for you and how you pick and choose. Cause like you probably experienced, there's about 1,000 different marketing options or more. So do you have a strategy where you kind of let yourself off the hook? Like, for example, for somebody who doesn't want to do TikTok, but they feel like they have to, well, I'm going to let myself off the hook because I'm going to do this, or I only allow myself to do, 5 marketing. I don't know. Like, do you have any strategies like that?
I mean, I think everyone sort of has to do that calculus for yourself. For me, like, my Facebook page is basically abandoned. I mean, I'll sort of babysit it. I'll check it once in a while. And like, I'll cross post if I'm posting something to Instagram. I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll cross post that to Facebook. Sure. But like, I don't really have a strategy there. It exists. So I think
because your time's going somewhere else.
My time's going somewhere else. Exactly. And I think that, there is that calculus that you have to make because time is finite, just like money. And we only have so much of it. As far as what is working for me, I think it's a combination of return on investment, which sometimes is easier to track with something like a paid ad where it's very technical of, I spent $10 on this ad and I made 15, or I spent $10 and I made 2. And that's a very clear decision.
Makes sense.
But I also think it's an ROI of time, where you think about it from the sense of, let's say TikTok, for example. If you're just like, I cannot wrap my head around TikTok. I don't think in video. I hate short form content. I don't enjoy scrolling on the app. Then getting yourself to make something for TikTok is probably going to take hours. Are you going to get a return on those hours equal to what you put in? Probably not. And so find somewhere in marketing that you will.
That makes so much sense. Oh, that's tough too. Cause it's hard for us when we hear, everybody says this is the way. And I love that you're encouraging everybody listening that there's really no way to do it, right? There's no one way. So this question is probably going to pinhole again and not be something you want to answer. But some people were asking like, social media or ads, basically, like if you had to choose, which route would you go? So this might be one you don't want to answer, and that's okay.
No, I mean, it is really difficult. And I think it is so personal. Because
it really is.
If someone hates the idea of being on social media, if they have an anxiety that just makes them feel sick opening the app, don't do that to yourself. It's not worth it. I give you permission to say that it's not worth it. Protect your peace. But I think that ideally, again, you want to find a way to do both as an author.
I love that.
And even if that's my Instagram is a sad little account, but I do my best and I focus most of my time on ads because that's my happy place. Then that can be your balance. But
I love that.
I think that, I also do think try it, kind of being sort of the cliche, like adult.
Because you might like it, kind of.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, with TikTok. When TikTok first became a thing, I was like, don't make me do TikTok. I don't want to do TikTok. I don't understand this app. I'm so old.
Same. You're so good at it now. You're great at it.
And that's the thing. I got on the app. I lurked. I watched what other people were doing. I spent time and I went, oh wait, this is actually kind of fun.
Right.
And now I love doing it. So I think that, there's sometimes too of, there's a fitness trainery thing that I've heard, but I love this idea. And it's this notion that, and this is in the context of the gym, but I'll bring it back. But it's this notion that, people go sometimes and exercise and they're like, oh, I have to do this. I have to do this. I don't want to do this. I have to do this. Whereas it ignores the fact that 1, it's a choice that you're making to do it. And 2, you get to do it. You have a body that is capable of doing it, whatever it is that you can do. And that in itself is a blessing that should be celebrated. And so I think about that, like it was kind of the light bulb moment for me that sort of went into even when, you know, my books are fighting with me, or I don't know what I'm doing with my ads and they're a mess and I have to take 5 hours to fix them. It's like, this is my job. I get to do this.
Right.
Or like, even if it's not your job yet and you want it to be, you know, you're on this journey. You get to write books. You have a passion. So many people want to write a book and never get to even do it at all. And so it's like, I think
mindset
that there are those things of, with something like social media, yes, it can be annoying and tedious and exhausting, but you get to do it. And that's kind of cool in its own way.
It is kind of cool to be like, oh no, I'm working right now. I'm on Instagram. I'm working.
Yeah. No, you do have to be careful of the false productivity, because I've definitely like been scrolling on TikTok going, I'm researching right now.
Totally.
As my manuscript sits unedited for the next 3 hours.
That's very, very much me. I love that. No, but that's so valuable to have that balance and that mindset. And I have a feeling a lot of your advice is really good mindset advice, but I'm super curious if you could nail down marketing into your top 3. This is another question that I'm like, oh, this might be really hard, but I'm going to ask it. Top 3 pieces of advice on how to write a book that people will buy, kind of that's the marketing side, and love.
So this is from the writing perspective. This is
I kind of wanted to tie in
that
more.
I would market. Okay.
Yeah, marketing would be fun too. So I'm kind of wanting to ask that.
Maybe one and then the other.
Let's do that.
Okay. So as far as writing the book, because I am one of those people where I think that fundamentally you have to have a good book, because you can have the best advertising, the best marketing, the best cover, but if the book isn't great, you're going to have a hard time getting it to sell. Yes. So my top 3 pieces of advice to write a book that people will hopefully buy and love. I think first and foremost, side note, I just want to emphasize the buy portion of this, because I am a big proponent of you define your own success, and not everyone goes into this industry commercially focused, and that's okay.
Yeah, true.
If you are not one of those people who are out there going, I want to make all the money that I can, that's okay. Because I've definitely encountered people who are like, I just want to say that I published a book. I don't care if just my mom reads it. I just want to say that. And that's valid. So take that, take what I say with a grain of salt. And I probably should have said that earlier, but here we are.
No, that's totally fine.
But okay, resuming. So the first thing that I would say, and the foremost thing that I would say, is have a clear genre and hook for the story. Make it, as there's a term called high concept, where
I like that.
It's basically, I think it originated in the film industry, but it's basically the ability to summarize a story in like 1 sentence or 2 sentences. Think of it like the elevator pitch. If you're familiar with that from business, but have a really clear genre and hook that can be conveyed very quickly and very clearly, that will have readers understanding it. Because the more difficult it is for you to articulate what your book is and who it's for, makes it that much harder for a reader to go, I don't know if I'm going to like this book or not, because I don't know if it's for me. And with that, kind of a sub bullet to that would be, I think a lot of times authors, especially when they're just starting out, will try and put everything into one story because they have all of these ideas. And they're like, this is cool, then this is cool, and this is cool, and this is cool. And you just try and start shoving it all into one story. It is okay to save ideas. In fact, it's probably preferable, because that's going to be what helps you write your next book, your next series. So have a clear picture. What works in that picture, keep. What doesn't work, get rid of. And save on the side, but get rid of for now. The second thing I would say, going back to what I said earlier, have a character that people will root for.
I love that.
Whether that's an underdog, whether that is someone out for vengeance for a very relatable or understandable thing, whatever the reason, you have to have people rooting for your character. And the third thing, maybe a bit of a cop out, but it's kind of, be consistent in all of your packaging and communication as to those things. Because
love that.
If you didn't write a fantasy romance, but your book has some romance in it, but you see fantasy romance is the thing right now, it can be really tempting to try and market your book as a fantasy romance because you're like, I want to hit that trend, and my book kind of has some romance on the side.
Yeah.
But a reader who's looking for a fantasy romance,
they're not going to like
They're not going to like it. They're not your reader. And that's okay.
Right.
Your readers are out there. Just focus on finding them. And the clearer you can be, the better it is. Which I guess that kind of goes on the marketing side. My top 3 things for marketing. My first one that comes to mind would be don't rush. I think a lot of people that I speak to, they're just so excited, understandably, to release a book that they just want to get it out as quickly as possible. And I think that taking time to be strategic, making a plan, that's going to really go a long way. And the second thing I would say is have a clear budget that you can spend in mind, because
that's good. Yeah.
It's very easy for things to go over quickly. And I view all marketing, but especially paid advertising, a lot like gambling. I don't spend money I can't lose. And I know the goal is to make money off of it, but
just in case.
Just in case. And more often than not, you will lose money before you make money, because you have to learn what works for your book. You have to study ad copy. And so you might get an ad that spends $500 over the course of 3 months to earn $2,000. That's great. But you might have had to spend $500 to earn 10 the 3 months before that, learning how to make that ad. And so because of that, you know, you really have to think about how much can I lose and stick to it. And then the last thing I would say for on the marketing side is, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, be nimble and be open to trying as many things as you can, because you don't know what's going to work for you and your personal time and workflow and mindset. And you also don't know what you might have to pivot to in the future.
Yes, I love that. And I love the, how you're saying like try things, but also you kind of, the way that you said it made me feel like it's okay to let go if it doesn't work too. I feel like a lot of authors just keep taking on more and more and more and more, and they don't subtract anything.
Yeah. And you never want to throw good money and time after bad.
Yes. That's really smart to have that, keeping in the budget in mind, like you said, and the ROI, just so many good things. I hope everybody watching, I hope you got so much out of this, because I know I did. And I should say really quick, because I know I mentioned at the beginning, but Elise has one-on-one coaching on her website. So I will link that below. And then also the exciting resource coming out for authors in the future. We're going to put an interest form below. And then obviously if it's a book or whatever it ends up being, once that goes live, I will link, the actual link to it below as well. So let's end with some fun outro questions. This is my favorite one to ask too, is what's something on your author bucket list that you'd like to see happen?
Obviously a good TV series would be great. New York Times would also be great. Can't really do that as an indie author, but if I ever go on the trad side of things, like that would be cool.
That'd be cool.
But going back to my definitions of success is I just get to be a full-time author for the rest of my life. And if I hit that benchmark, I'm happy. Everything else is just extra joy.
Yes, I love that. And then if you could give an aspiring author one piece of advice, what would you say?
Don't compare your draft to someone else's finished work.
Oh, that's
good.
And
I mean that both in the literal sense of my first drafts are hot garbage.
Me too.
And so I get authors who are like, but your finished books are so pretty. And I'm like, I spent like 10 months editing them to make them that way. And also thank you for thinking my books are pretty. Don't be discouraged because you're not writing like this other author. And I think that also just, it can be extended metaphorically to, what people present online. That's their finished manuscript. That's their pretty polished version of the reality they want to project. It's not truth in most cases, or not the whole truth in most cases.
It's never that clean. Yeah.
Never that clean, never that polished, never that pretty.
Yes.
And so I think that study other authors, learn what you can from them, but comparison is the thief of joy. And we
Yes.
all have different starting places, and we all come with certain privileges or lack thereof. And so don't be comparing yourself and where you are in the process to where someone else is, especially when that somewhere else is what they're portraying online or social media or something like that.
Right. And it might not even be the full picture.
Exactly.
So true. Yeah. I love that because comparison can be such a block to writing as well. So like, that's really, really valuable advice. And so, okay, my last question is, where can we find you online? And I will of course link everything below.
So the big link is just elisekova.com, ELICKVA.com, my website. I have all of my social links there. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. Those are kind of my big ones. You can check out my newsletter or join my text line from my website. I also have, as you mentioned, I have my writing coaching. I also have a writing and publishing tips newsletter that's completely free, where I send out advice every month.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make and it'll probably be linked below, but I'm going to make a elisekova.com/writing that sort of has all of my resources in one place, and that interest form, and, you know, whatever else I have going on.
Yes, all the future things.
All the future things that pop into my head. But truly my website is probably, I try as hard as I can to get as much information as I can there. And that's probably the place to check.
I love that. Your website is gorgeous, by the way. I'll link that below. And then the /writer is what you said? Writing. Perfect. I will link that below too. I'll make sure that's all under there.
Thank you
so much for being here. This was so fun.
Thank you for having me, and happy writing, everyone. Good luck, and I wish you all the best.